Okay, we'll begin now with a panel discussion involving three of the founding members of the Flourishing Lives Coalition. Just ask, can everyone hear okay? At the back? You can hear? Louder. It is. I'll have to speak closer. We'll bellow. I'm delighted to introduce Maria Lagos, Director of Sector Development Innovation at Skills for Care, Olivia Dix, Interim Principal Grants Officer at Citybridge Trust, and Lucien-Paul Stanfield, CEO of the Claremont Project and Chair and Founder of Flourishing Lives. So Lucien-Paul, if we can start with you, can you tell us a bit about the origins of Flourishing Lives?
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for coming today. It's really amazing to see so many people here. It's been quite a journey getting to this point, and it's the beginning of a much longer and more exciting, perhaps, a journey for all of us. I guess there were three starting points for me in seeing Flourishing Lives come about. The first was I started in this sector in a day centre called Claremont. There were, at that time, about 12, maybe 15 service users, a term that I don't like. And I had invited a puppet making workshop team in to do some work. And one of those in the group was a guy called Fred. And Fred had been referred to us several months before, after his wife had died, and he had become mute. He wouldn't speak to anyone at all. This chokes me up, sorry. I was coming down the stairs that morning, and I heard him shout, "I love you!" And he had this puppet that he had made, and he was talking to other puppets, and that was like the floodgates. He started to become active in all areas of the centre. Sorry, I didn't realise that would get to me quite so much. But that was a realisation that centres like Claremont, centres like yours, organisations like yours, can be far more than just tea and bingo. That actually we had an enormous amount that we could offer to people. So the second thing was realising that it wasn't just what we offered that mattered. It was how we offered it. That you could put on the most brilliantly professional, high-quality event or service, but that could actually be quite hollow. And that what really mattered was risking oneself in relationship with the people that you're working in partnership with. And that meant setting yourself aside a bit to understand them and to really connect with them. So that was the second big realization. And the third was, oh my God, this is a really fragmented sector. I didn't know, I maybe knew one or two other centres. I didn't really know what they were doing. There was no way for me to hook up with other organisations other than trawling the web and looking for ones that looked interesting. So there's an enormous amount of missed opportunities, I think, over the years, and hopefully that'll be addressed by this partnership. I think the charter, by the way, was written partly by older people. In fact, we did research with hundreds of people to come up with this charter. Some are here today, and it's been a journey of about 5 years, I think. You, I think, are the most among the most progressive organisations in London, and I think together we can offer something that's markedly different and change the sector more broadly and nationally, I hope too. We all work with people who have been lonely, isolated, depressed, and frankly just bored. And I think for some of those people, they have started to feel that their lives don't matter. And I believe passionately, as I'm sure you do too, that every life matters. And that together we can do something fantastically different and rewarding for everyone that will lead to more flourishing lives. Thanks.
should add, getting choked up or whooping and hollering, they're all very acceptable things. So anyone who wants to do any of those things, do it, please. So Maria, just focusing now in terms of sector development and innovation, can you give us your views on what the future of services for older people can be?
Yes, of course I can. I have to say I'm delighted to be here because we hosted one of the initial meetings of this coalition when it started, and we've been watching progress with interest, and I'm delighted at the progress that has been made. So in terms of services, I think, I'm privileged to be in a room full of people who, have, you've just said, are at the cutting edge of creativity. But the reality is that what we need to aim for in terms of all services across the spectrum, not just state and community services, home care, residential services, all of them are services that have an approach which is person-centered, which is centered on the needs of people. Services that are co-designed with people, not done to people, and services where all the people are seen first and foremost as citizens that have rights, the right to have their needs met, the right to choose, the right to be in control if they can, the right to be treated as human beings, first and foremost. And there are many, many examples across services of excellent practice, but we have a long way to go. And I don't think we can pretend that we don't. The aim is for all services to achieve a level of quality that is what people who need care and support, I don't like service users that people who need care and support need. And what we are focusing at the moment is in a sector like social care. You would all know, with a recruitment and retention problem, quite a massive recruitment and retention problem, is how we are going to recruit the right number of people with the right attitudes, values, and behaviors. Where are we going to get them from? But principally, how we're going to attract and retain people that actually want to be in social care and have the values and attitudes. Training can always come later, but we are finding that if people don't have the values and attitudes to begin with, it's much more difficult for them. It's much more difficult for people to receive the service that they need, and people leave. They're not retained. So at the moment, one of in terms of innovation, one of the initiatives that we are developing and supporting in the sector is value-based recruitment, i.e. supporting employers to recruit for values, to look at raw talent, to look at other things, not just a traditional way of interviewing people differently, looking for people's experience, life experience, as part of what they bring. And we've done an evaluation of the early adopters, and we're already finding that those people remember that it's incredibly costly to keep recruiting and losing people. But those people who've adopted a value-based approach to recruitment their retention rates are 5% higher than anybody else in the sector. Sickness records have gone down quite considerably, but most importantly, the people in the services are reporting a better quality because there is continuity, because people are there, and because people are there to stay. It makes, again, it changes not just the service, but the culture of the service. And I think in services for the future, which links to the second question about the profile of all the people in society, there's got to be a culture shift in services and a culture shift in society, but we are kind of helping employers at the moment to have that culture shift that if you recruit for values, you're only going to retain these people if you really clearly look and challenge the values of your organization. And by doing that, you immediately focus on quality because you're looking at what is the best way for quality. Once you've got them, you do need to support them in terms of training and development. And I'm talking about older people who have been around for a long, long time, and I remember the studies even in the early 70s about what matters to people when they need support. And from the 70s onwards up until today, everybody will report that the quality of a relationship with a professional, with somebody who's there to help, matters the most, because that's the most important thing. And actually, that's the thing that people remember. Long afterwards, that quality, that relationship. So an initiative like this in terms of developing training that supports people to understand relationships and supports people to understand them in a particular way, with a particular stance, is really a great contribution to the whole world of training and development in social care. And that's, I think I'll leave it at that. That's what I wanted to say. But I'm going to be around if you want to ask me more about value-based recruitment or anything else we are doing in terms of a quality workforce.
Thank you, Marie. So thanks for battling through a cold.
Yes, sorry. I should have said.
Thank you.
You reminded me, now I'm going to cough.
Olivia, I can ask the same question of you from kind of a funder's perspective.
Sure. Don't you hate being the last person to speak? I've been crossing bits off what I was going to say.
Oh, sorry.
But we are talking as a funder. City Bridge Trust has, from the first day it was started, funded work with older people. And I think that has changed over the years. We've got quite a lot of experience of seeing what makes a good project and what doesn't. And, you know, I want to start by saying it's nice to be thanked for funding Flourishing Lives, but I was really excited about it. So we feel really privileged to be part of this and to have been a funder of it. And also, I know there are organisations in the room as well that we have funded or are funding or may fund. So it was good to hear they're at the cutting edge. It makes us feel good about ourselves as a funder. So I think... So what I'm going to say is based on being a funder. I mean, I have had some experience of day centres for older people when I ran a community centre. And I didn't run the older people's services. They ran me, actually, as I recall. But, and also, you know, some reflecting on some experience in the health service and indeed with my own grandparents who both lived in their 90s. And I guess the first thing is, and the thing that we battle with is the definition of older people. And absolutely you need an age-related definition because in terms of getting services, but it doesn't really help with the person-centred thing. So I was thinking about, for example, my neighbour who is 90 this year and writes and illustrates 2 successful children's books every year, you know. So of course she's an older person, but she's in a very different position, a very fortunate position to lots of other people. And obviously we're all living longer and many of us are living in a much better state than we would have done thanks to improvement in health and so on. I think on the other hand, we have to accept that we are all getting into an ageing society, and I think National Office of Statistics says by 2066 there are going to be 500,000 people over 100 in the UK. And inevitably that is going to mean that there are going to be more people living with more complex needs. And we need to deal with that. And I don't think, actually, I did some work in Europe for 2 years. Am I allowed to mention Europe still? That place over there. And my work on health boards, you know, everybody's saying we need to address this, we need to produce really good quality services. It isn't absolutely clear to me that there's enough thinking going on about it at government and commissioning level. People may want to disagree, but so maybe the helpful definitions are, and this is why I crossed one of these things off, but I'm going to say it again, is I think there may be frailty, social isolation, and I think boredom, actually. I do think that I can really recollect going to visit my grandparents when they got to the nursing home or care home stage, and basically they were bored. You know, they were ticking off the days, even though they had a family around them, but they had lost so much. Mainly, actually, because their social network had died. So these are things we need to think about. So from the point of view of a funder, what do we want to fund? What we think should be funding? I think we have to, as people have said, recognise that although there is a lot of information out there, as you were saying, about what works, person-centred integration, actually there isn't much money about it at the moment. So it's a difficult time to get people to take on commissioners to take on things they don't have to take on. So we really need to fight for the evidence-based. So from the point of view of a funder, obviously we don't want to substitute for government funding. We're all funders, I think, are in a bit of a little difficult space about that at the moment. But I think what we would say is we want to fund things that enable people to live well. So I should say, incidentally, that we're guilty of this age thing as well, because our current programme says that we're going to focus on people over 75. And there was a reason for doing that. The reason was that people over 75 tended many of them. It's difficult to get to have more needs. But it is, in a way, a kind of an unnecessary block that I think we may, in our new strategy, remove. I'm looking at my senior colleague over there who's nodding, so that's good. So, and what does it mean to live well? So I think we're really interested in stuff that does have some evidence base, although I think the evidence base is still not strong enough in some ways. But so it'd be things that people can do. I think it's arts, it's education, it's movement, and it's social structures. It's creating somewhere where people can make new friendships as well. And I think the other thing we were talking about is really it's good if you can create the relationships as well between the generations, that they shouldn't just be places for older people. I mean, everybody wants to spend time with their peers, but I think, you know, for those of us like me in the demographic but still working, one of the things I really like about working is the contact with people of all ages and the different views. And so I think we have to be careful not to make... I mean, it's a difficult balance. I recognise it's a balance. And what else we can do as a funder, I think we'd really like, we're very keen on what is an important issue, which is, you know, how we can do the best thing for older people. So what we would like to do is to help encourage some of the newer models, and also we have a role in influencing other funders. And I think we were talking about this morning, and I think as funding this, we have a duty actually to go and talk to other funders about it and try and get them involved in thinking about it as well, because and maybe particularly City Bridge Trust with its, I don't know if people know, but the City of London Corporation is our sole trustee, so we have quite extraordinary contacts that many other funders don't have, and we should be talking to the corporation as well about these things and using those contacts and ins to do it. So I think that's what I want to say at the moment. She said the rest.
Thanks, Olivia. Yeah, as I said in my welcome speech, I mean, there is a real sense that there's a moment. I
can't hear you very well.
Sorry. As I said in my welcome speech, there is a real sense that there's a pivotal moment. We're at a pivotal moment, and myself and Cordelia have been kind of meeting with so many of you guys and coming away from the meeting, it's just going, oh my God, they were great. They were amazing, because the activities and kind of events that so many of you guys put on, and the kind of level of engagement with your members, there is that real overwhelming for us from our kind of privileged position of meeting you all and kind of mapping the provision across London. There is a huge sense of, for us anyway, positive momentum. But I guess my question to kind of feed back into you guys is, we're aware on the ground level of that momentum, but to give the momentum the push it needs, how do we change the public discourse around ageing so that, you know, funding is kind of fed back in and on a media level as well, cultural level? So starting with you, Lucien-Paul.
Well, when I get to the point, when I get to the point of doing less work, I don't think I'll stop work completely, probably ever, but I don't want to suddenly be thought of or treated in a different way. I don't want to suddenly be offered a comfy chair and a cup of tea, and to be thought of as needing some kind of assistance. I might need assistance, and if I do, I would want that to be not just person-centered, although that's very important. I also want that experience to be between equals. I think it's possible to be, or to think you're being person-centered and in fact have an unequal relationship. So that's very important to me. I think at that stage too, a lot of people, and I imagine myself, will lose some of my social contexts. At the moment, a lot of my context is at work, and the people I work with, quite a few of whom are here, and they're very important to me. They're part of the fabric of my life. And assuming I retire and don't have that anymore, how do I create new relationships, friendships? So I think to both of your points, friendship and establishing and creating new social networks is incredibly important. Almost as important, in fact, as the activities themselves. And there's actually some very good science around that as well. If you're interested, there's a fantastic book called A General Theory of Love, which talks about the biological importance of being interrelated and the effects on health, mental health as well, but actually physical health. I think London is blessed with enormous cultural and sporting capital, and one of my hopes for this network, this coalition, is that we can connect each other and produce a far richer range of services. So I'm looking forward to that blossoming with the help of funders, obviously. I think there's also a role for us in shifting perceptions around later life. The more subtle ones, perhaps, are harder to address. So, how easy is it for someone to slip into the slippery slope, if you like, of ageism themselves? Or I'd love a cup of tea, and someone then brings you a cup of tea. Or I don't think I want to move that. All those very subtle, small things, I think I want to challenge in myself, and I kind of want to challenge in other people when I hear it. What else do I think can we do to change public discourse? I think there is a challenge around funding. A lot of funders are still fairly old school. Some of them even talk about the elderly. And it's a challenge for us to get the money we need without playing into that sort of narrative. But I think actually there are more and more progressive funders, and that is shifting. I obviously have to plug the training. I think the more that we can have a workforce and be part of a culture that is about real relationships and a relational approach to work, the better. And I think it'll spread from us, the progressives, if you like, to the wider sector and beyond. And I do think it is happening elsewhere, in other sectors as well. So it's very exciting, and I hope you'll enjoy the bits of training that we're going to do today as a sort of taster of those things.
Thank you. Maria, if I can put the same question to you then.
Well, it is very much, I mean, I agree with everything you've said, and it's very much the same issue in terms of the profile and image of social care, if I can put it like that.
Yeah. That
we struggle and battle, and we continue to do that in terms of getting people to understand what it is, what it does, when it does it well, how important it is to people. And again, it is about continuing doing that. It's also continuing really looking at this, what we call co-production. You know, we all have like short-term terms that mean something to us, but when I talk about co-production, I mean real co-production with people of the services that they require. And that is not just about consulting after you've decided to do something and then you consult and ask, do you fancy that? It looks good. It is about starting from the premise that services can be properly co-produced and co-designed with the people that are going to use them. And that's happening again more and more, which is encouraging, but we've got a long way to go. On a practical level, we have a scheme called I Care Ambassadors, and these are people who work in social care and go to schools and colleges to talk to children and to young people thinking of a career about what social care is about. And that is a really important part of changing perception, because it is really important that we start talking to the young about what it means, you know, to be of a particular age and a particular moment in time. And this intergenerational work, I get very excited about, because I think it's really important. Coming from another background and from another culture where older people are much more involved, I think, it's changing now. You can see that the more you involve young people in understanding the place of everybody in society, the better it gets. But it is a journey, so we can't pretend it's anything other than a journey at the moment.
Thank you. I should say actually that Flourishing Lives are running a free workshop on intergenerational practice at Jackson's Lane on June 26th, so please sign up for that. We'll send the information around. Great, all right.
Contribution.
Please.
Just in changing the public perception and the debate from identifying older people purely as recipients, older people themselves are a key resource in providing care to one another. We run an activity together, and the real top quality work that goes on is the peer support work that goes on between these who hold legal responsibility and management responsibility for our services and grant givers. So we need to start highlighting the generosity and the skills that are given when people come to retirement, and through the gift of that they also achieve self-fulfillment, givers to each other, and that they save social services and health providers a fortune through that gift and that peer support.
Thanks, Mick. Actually, I was going to come to a provocation that you brought up in our meeting, but I'll touch on that in a moment. But yeah, thank you, Mick. I'll just put the question to you, Olivia.
Okay.
On how.
I think I thought about this in a slightly wider way, and I was reflecting. Things have changed quite a lot. I think the culture. I was thinking about the relationship that people of my age have with their children and their grandchildren, which is very different to the ones that I had with my parents and they had with their parents. And there is a much more sharing of interest. I mean, there is talk about this. You know, my brother, who's in his late 60s, goes to concerts with his 30-year-old son. You know, it's kind of... So that has all blurred a bit, I think, and that is better. I think there's also been a lot more things in the media around the role, going to what you said, the role that older people play. There's a lot, for example, about how so many grandparents are looking after children because both the parents need or want to work. So I think there is a bit of a change in the discourse, but I think these things take a very long time, and sometimes they take a bit of a knock. And I do actually think the Brexit thing has not been helpful in this, because there really has been. I mean, it's the first thing my daughter rang up on the day afterwards was say, thanks very much. I said, vote for it. But there definitely has been a bit of a divide over this, and a bit of a feeling that, you know, how true that is, there's been all kinds of arguments about it, but there certainly is a perception, which is the important thing, that older people may have made the lives of younger people more difficult for the future. I think that's true. And I do think it's really important to have lots of intergenerational things. I also think that some, I won't name any of them, some of the organisations working with older people need to have a good look at how they portray them as well in their literature, and how they write their grant applications to people like us. I think there's, you know, and it's a slightly different example, but one of the things that really gets to me now is international charities who for a long time gave up this awful kind of baby with big eyes and malnutrition, but that's now what you see all the time. And as it gets more difficult to get funding, I think the temptation is to fall back on the stereotypes and talk about poor people in need. And we are talking about people who need things, but we have to be careful not to contribute to that debate, to that kind of feeling. And I think that I just want to finish with this actually by just telling you a nice little story, which you'll like. So one of my colleagues got on a bus the other day and was sitting next to a very lively older woman who had a crutch, and she had tinsel around it and dyed hair, and she was very cheerful and chatty, and they got chatting. And so my colleague said, where are you going? She said, I'm going to the Claremont project. And she was apparently somebody who was bereaved and been asked to go, and it had changed her life, and she now went not only to you, but to several other places where she got a lot of help. So I think it was just one of those perfect examples of how these things can change people's lives. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Olivia. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the main aim of Flourishing Lives, is that kind of area of connectivity and connecting kind of arts and health, and the hope, really, the understanding that connecting them and developing relationships between the two sectors will obviously benefit older people far better. And going back to the kind of provocation that Mick brought up in when we met first, it was about kind of linking up with the CCGs, and I think that's a kind of major, we totally took that on board, and that's a major part of kind of changing the discourse as well, and so we're working on that. So just to tell you personally that, yeah, that's kind of something we're working on. But I think we have time now to take questions from the floor. Yeah. Okay.
So I'm not trying to make this a closed-down project monopoly. I'm Jeremy. I'm trustee at the Closed Down Project. I think one of the things that's also very interesting, we're fortunate that we have premises. And I think when, well, first of all, my wife and then I become involved in the project, I think originally it was thought that unless you have a Zimmer frame, you wouldn't go into the project. Had that image among my contemporaries. And actually now the project is very much, we sought out Santa for a while, would come into the project. It means that the project is part of the area. So there isn't this sense of older people being cut off as an older person's thing. It is a community project and people can go there. It's about how we can challenge not just the intergenerational thing, but also to see ourselves as part of the community. And I think if we can encourage that, if you can...
Can I just sort of clarify? The range of aspirations and hopes are sort of terrific at the moment, outside London.
Our aspirations are nationwide.
Global, surely.
They are global as well, yeah, universal. Where the initial funding, so the initial 3 years funding is for London wide build of the coalition, but after the 3 years, we are looking to take it nationally.
When is that 3 year period?
It's going to end June 2019. Yeah.
Can I just add something? Last week we had a visit from the Commissioner for the African Union on, she was a Commissioner for Public Health, which included older people's work. And as a result of listening to the Flourishing Lives stuff and hearing some of the feedback from you that you've given David and Cordelia in their meetings with you, she's taking back that package and the charter to form the basis of a program in Namibia. So it has gone international already, but we don't tell funders that because we're only funded for London.
And we are already in talks with the National Arts and Health Forum about partnering with them on kind of piloting the project in other cities. So that's, yeah, up to you.
Hi, I'm not from the First Down Project. So, my name's Sue Elliott. I'm from Wandsworth Older People's Forum. It's not on my badge, but I don't know why. I think one of the main things that we have is that we have to deal, first of all, with everyday ageism and like everyday sexism, and we don't really see it. We have things that insults. Somebody was cross with me at a bus stop. Lots of people are cross with me. And said, old, and it was old. If I'd been young, I wouldn't have been a young cow. I was an old cow. And I think, we forget this. I mean, I'm a bit of an old cow. But anyway, so there's that everyday sexism. But also we have to be aware of how older people are patronised. It is really, and it should, if we see it, if we hear it, we should stop it. It's horrible. I think that's a lot of what you were saying. And you know, the old people, the elderly signs and all that. I mean, we've just got to be so aware of things all the time, really, if we can be.
Can I just say something to that? I think you're right, and there does need to be, I think, a big advocacy movement, really. And I think there are you know, I think there are other movements, there's a disability movement, other movements where you can really learn a lot from about how you do this, and that movement has really changed. It has certainly changed the public discourse. I'm not saying it's got rid of all stigma and that, but it has made people talk about it in a different way. And I think, just to go back to the sexism thing, that is the one, maybe one of the few real gains, from feeling a cynical mood, but it has changed the way people talk about things. And once you change the way people talk about things, you do change the way they think about them, I think, in the long run. So I agree.
Annie, yeah.
I'm Annie Stevenson. I work for myself in social care, mainly in health, but it's wrong, which is so awful. But the news was hot on Monday about social care and the green paper that's coming apparently for consultation. So I would urge us to put some almost psychodynamic approach of how society is treating older people as victims, with disrespect. And this is being reflected in the funding debacle, is how I would look at it. It's a complete mess. And if we don't kind of start with a values-based approach about what we think is important in a civilized society, about how we treat our elders, I think that's a very good starting point, and Flourishing Lives is urgent.
Thanks, Annie. Yeah, I think it's that thing of kind of we need to, because we are at that pivotal moment, it needs kind of everyone kind of working together to kind of really tip it over, tip it over that tipping point, I guess, because going back to the ageism point, we went to the design museum, and it was that thing of trying to redress the "Beware elderly" sign, and it was, yeah, there was an actual sign saying "Beware elderly," and they'd opened it out to kind of a lot of design companies to redress it, and none of them really came up with an answer that was much better. But it kind of shows that, at the very least, I know I'm kind of grasping at, you know, a silver lining, but at the very least there's a sense that widely there's an acceptance that everyone's kind of getting it wrong, and they're kind of looking around going, how can we get it right, is now the point we're at. So
It's opening eyes, isn't it? In a way, we're all, you know, it's everybody's business. We all want to age well, and people are very much in denial.
But also what I think is positive is, for the first time, social care is at the top of the political agenda.
Exactly.
Because it's taking years for those of us who are funded by government departments as well to say it's not health and social care. It's, your social care is just as important as health. So it is a good opportunity to keep it on the agenda and to keep explaining.
Because the government don't get it. They really don't. They don't see these. So it is about just raising awareness and opening eyes, and the benefit to everyone. Effective, it's a win-win. People are bringing older and not excluding older people.
No.
did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just wondering if anyone was aware of ageism being addressed at schools in the same way that gender and other things are in diversity training in corporations as well.
Helen Godson, Counterpoint Dance, we're a group dance company for the over 55, so most of us.
I think you need to shout.
Yeah, sorry.
And we're doing a lot of outreach into the community to provide a different view of the older person. And we have gone into school in order to show younger people the potential of older people. So that's one. She did have another question that I had my hand up for.
Yeah, go for it.
Practical one, Paul. Organisations that you're invited.
Would you like? Thank you. Organisations that are being asked to subscribe to the Charter, how are you going to harness their power in order to present a unified platform, or what platforms are you going to use, and do you have any plans and aspirations for how that's going to work out?
At the moment, we've got two pieces really. There's the online forums, which we hope will be used more and more, and we want those forums to be not just about discussing what's going on in your organisations, but we want group facilitators to put their details up there so that we all have access to them, so that they can advertise their services. So if you're looking for a ballet dancer, a ballet teacher, or a contemporary dance teacher, you might be able to find them on the forums. best practices, contract examples, and all that kind of stuff. So we hope that that's going to grow as an online community. And we're currently doing quarterly training and networking sessions. We've had 2 already, and we've been doing that in association with the Age Action Alliance for the Arts, and we'll continue doing those. They are London-based at the moment. Beyond that, we haven't gone much beyond that, other than the training. But I think a next step will be the creation of a separate organisation that has its own management and trustees. Because at the moment it's a project underneath the wing of Claremont, because we could afford a bit to do it and get some funding to do it. But I think it will go that way.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Anything? Yeah, just in.
Trustee of a charity that does something very similar, but we're concentrating on dementia. And thank you. And so I was wondering whether, I mean, you've obviously are looking for people as they age, and some of those will develop dementia. So what are you doing about helping people identify and helping them live with this problem?
Well, I think that the coalition is you. So I could throw the question back to you, really. The coalition itself doesn't have a specific agenda on what to do. We all contribute to that conversation. I mean, just with my Claremont hat on, separate to that, about, I would say, 15% of our members, and we've got about 850 at the moment, are showing signs of early dementia. And for us, because we're so short-staffed, there's a point at which we can't help them. If they need a carer, the carer can come with them. That's fantastic. But if we need to watch that they don't leave the building, or if they need help in the loos or whatever, we can't support that. But actually, what do you do?
Well, we provide exactly the same sort of thing as you do, which is actually to provide training for people who can give support and are interested in providing arts activities for people with early dementia, because there's a lot of evidence, well, there is some scanty evidence, shall I say, that actually having people involved in things like that helps to stave off the progression. So if we can keep people more interested. So we do allow, the person living with dementia comes with their carer to various meetings, and we provide training for the whatever type of arts group wish to provide some activities for them. And interestingly, the funding that this charity that I belong to, I've only just started, I hasten to add, since I retired, but this charity gets funding from outside London and not in London, which is very interesting. So I think it's an interesting thing that we're trying to do the same, but just very slightly different. And there may be some overlaps where people will say, well, actually, some of the people visiting us are having these problems. Can you help us, and vice versa? But we provide a very similar sort of things to your ideas.
Well, just to follow on from what Paul was saying, a big part of the coalition build in the last 10 months has been obviously listening to the areas where you need support, but also taking on what you're willing to offer. And so one of the more recent members to join, Elderberry's Day Centre in Redbridge, they offer dementia care training, and they said any of the other coalition members, if they want and have the time to send their staff and volunteers to them to take on the training, that's on offer. And that's kind of a major part of the coalition build as well, is kind of sharing that information and sharing that knowledge. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah. Just hang on a second.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Hello, I'm Sue Stewart. I'm not representing any organisation. I'm here on my own. I wanted to go back to the question of changing the public discourse on ageing and to ask what people felt the impact of the World Health Organization platforms on age-friendly communities have been, because they've been around since 2002, and I haven't heard very much about them, but maybe you know better.
Annie, do you?
No, sorry, does anybody know? Because that's such a good point, I think, because I've been wondering the same. I don't know if anybody else has. I remember it very well. It was very powerful with some reports. The report was very powerful. And I think the built environment, there are reports about this that I don't think are widely recognised, and models like Claremont is vital to prevent institutionalisation, I think, unnecessary institutionalisation.
And it was in
Yeah,
not just.
That's right, yeah.
So it's about getting your house future-proofing, wasn't it? About future-proofing. And so we get that report out, actually, and remind ourselves. Because I think it would help us.
Just to interject on the age-friendly communities, they're not dead. So I'm from the Centre for Ageing Better, and we've recently taken on the responsibility for basically reigniting that network of communities. So it was based in Manchester. They were leading on that initiative, but obviously it's quite a lot for one age-friendly city to lead a whole network. So we are now taking on the kind of responsibility. So we've, about 2 months ago, appointed an age-friendly communities manager. So anyone who's interested in that initiative, please come and grab me today. There's lots of age-friendly communities out there that we don't actually know about, who aren't signed up to the WHO network. There's lots of areas that are doing some fantastic things and who are interested in becoming age-friendly, which we don't know about unless you're speaking to someone. So we're kind of going around and picking up more and more and more communities and cities that are interested in that initiative. So do come and grab me, and I will get out all your contact details, and then I'll put you in contact with our age-friendly communities manager. Great.
That's great, thank you.
What a fabulous example of a coalition at work. It was brilliant. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that came up in the research fairly early on. Cordelia kind of came across it and just said, this is fantastic. Why is it not happening? And so that's great to hear that it is. Because,
it's still there.
Kind of months ago. That's brilliant. I wonder if we can just squeeze one more in, if there's any last question from anyone? Yes.
Very convenient.
Go for it.
Yeah, just a thing about evidence-based and how important it is. I just wanted to hear your opinions, or three, about what we should be doing for evidence-based and evaluations and all of that, because clearly we have to do it. I don't like doing it because I think it's invasive to the work that we do sometimes. You know, I'm just about, let's do it. I know all of it. I know how much it works. So I'd quite like to hear your opinions on sort of evidence. Yeah, by the way, I'm from Run by a Dance Company, and we have a very large dance and health programme.
Very, very quick. I should interject at that point. One of the first workshops we did was an evaluation methods workshop. So as the coalition is built as well, those organisations that joined afterwards have said, please have it again. We will. So we'll have it later this year. Yeah.
Fab.
So yeah, just a line or two.
Just very quickly. I know that there's a minute's silence at 11. Yeah, it's incredibly important, and there are some really good, easy-to-use measures out there. Claremont uses something called the Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, 15 questions. Very easy to do and very easy to score, and gives you really interesting results. But I'm happy to talk to you about that, or to come to the next evaluations workshop.
You guys have a line to
very
just
quickly.
Before.
I think there are lots of easy methods, and I think it is important to do. And one of the reasons it's important to do, apart from funders like it, is that, you know, if you're working hard all the time trying to do things, it's good actually to have something that enables you, particularly if it's been a hard week, to say, actually, we do know we're making a difference. Yeah. And I think for many people working in small organisations, that's really important to know.
Sorry. Thank you. Thanks, Olivia. I think we should stop now to observe the minute silence, if everyone's happy with that. I want to say thanks again to the panel, to Lucien-Paul Stanfield, Olivia Dix and Maria Lagos. It's been great. And yeah, I think we observe the minute silence now. Thank you.